Because of unfortunate events that have happened here in Colorado, it's turned into a blessing because some of the people that will be speaking tonight have come from those and have a wealth of knowledge to help us. Our next presenter is a 24-year law enforcement veteran, 17 years as a police officer. She was the first special agent assigned to Colorado Department of Public Safety dedicated to school safety. She has served as a hostage negotiator for the FBI, for the Department of Homeland Security, and is currently the director of safe schools with the Colorado Attorney General's Office. Her resume is long and impressive and speaks to her commitment to making our schools safe. She's the founding executive director of Safe to Tell, a program that is in place for the purpose of trying to prevent school tragedies before they happen. Secret Service studies show 81% of the time someone other than the attacker knew a violent attack was going to happen. 4 out of 5 times at least one person knew there was going to be a school attack where someone lost their life. 60% of the time more than one person knew, but fear kept them from reporting it. That is what our next presenter felt compelled to create. That is why our next presenter felt compelled to create Safe to Tell. This initiative allows anyone to anonymously report any threatening or suspicious behavior that could endanger others, so the proper authorities can monitor and intervene. Please welcome someone who has dedicated her life to serving others, Susan Payne.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. It was very emotional. I speak for many of the law enforcement in the room, and my father was a police officer that rose up through the ranks. He was a SWAT commander. His cousin was a homicide detective known for many homicide investigations around the country as an expert. So I was raised in that environment. But one of the things that we share as police officers or emergency responders is we have seen unspeakable things. And I am a mother of 3 children, I'm proud to say. And throughout my career, the things that we see and the lives that are lost, the one question that becomes part of the investigation is, were there missed warning signs? Were there opportunities to intervene? And that's not just when it's a criminal-related death. That includes accidental death, that includes risky behavior, suicide, overdose. Were there opportunities? And what were the attitudes towards speaking up if they recognized that there was a warning sign? So when I stand before you, I really want to kind of give you a little bit of a briefing regarding what we know about school safety. My career, I was brought in when the Columbine tragedy occurred. So as we watched that event unfold, and we looked at police response and preparedness and recovery, those are components that we really focused on. It was later that, or even actually earlier, that we focused on, can we prevent these incidents? And I would tell you, I've been set around the country, and John Michael probably say this, but one of the things, we have sort of a club that you start to belong to. So whether it's Natalie, the teacher that was shot 4 times at Sandy Hook, who's a dear friend, Christina, who was shot at Virginia Tech as a college student, Colin, who survived, was shot 4 times as well. They were 7 survivors out of 17 in that room. When you look at the lessons learned throughout history, I believe as a community member, as a mom, I want other adults to know these things. My journey in my law enforcement career was action-packed, exciting, but I kept being put back into a school environment for just various reasons. And I learned so much from working with educators and principals and leaders about where there were gaps. And as the time has unfolded, I think one of the things that we focused on is changing the attitudes. Most people had an attitude that it couldn't happen here. I guarantee you, if your elementary school had the tragedy that Sandy Hook, this room would not only be filled, but there would be people standing outside. And that's part of what is hard for me when you see our community safety and our school safety really relies on participation and all of us being aware of what we can watch for, what we can look for, what we don't ignore. The other component is believing on teaching. I truly have believed throughout my career of educating children. From the little ones, we talk about drugs and safety and walking through parking lots safe. A lot of times we talk about stranger danger. However, I'm not a big stranger danger fan. I like to talk about when it's a stranger, but 93% of the time when a child is assaulted, it's by an adult that has gained their trust. So we can't ignore the fact that just because you know the teenage boy in the neighborhood, that that's not a stranger. We have to feel like, what are your boundaries? Are you strong enough to speak out, to run? It's okay to run from somebody telling you what to do. So making sure that young people are trained through situational awareness, scenarios, where they can kind of put themselves in that position. I was talking to your assistant principal, positive behavior support, PBIS. I was on the advisory team to bring that here. And that is a great way to engage kids in knowing the solution. So where I'm getting to this is I've been all over the country here lately, and one of the things that schools, and what we learned in Colorado, is that immediately following the Columbine tragedy, the people investigating that realized that there were a number of people that knew it was going to happen, not just one, not just two, but many, and no one spoke up. Some of them didn't believe it would happen. Some of them had a fear of reporting it to an adult. Young people told us that they feared by being the person that told they would be labeled a snitch. They were worried about being excluded by their classmates. They didn't know if it was a joke, if it was real. So they immediately put up a tip line. And so a lot of states followed suit. And Michigan is one. They've had the same tip line since after Columbine. After 3 years of a tip line in Colorado, where there was a poster in every single school in Colorado, the assessment 3 years later only showed 7 times it was ever used. But it checked a box. Michigan, they couldn't even tell me when it had been used last. And they've had it for a number of years, 14 years. So what I'm going to talk a little bit about is what we tried to do strategically to say that we learned a lot of information on the best chances of preventing violence. And that was focusing on what were the missed warning signs, what were the precipitating behaviors. So when you look at 81% from 1974 to 2000, they were able to show, like Mr. Posey said, 81% of the time they could even identify the person that knew and didn't tell. 60% of it, the time, it was more than one person. 93% of the time, the person that did the attack had exhibited concerning behavior prior to the attack. I think those are important things. When we look at how we lose our children, school shootings, that's something we have to be concerned with. But we also have to look at other factors that we address on a daily basis. So when we look, and I'm sorry, we didn't start my PowerPoint back there. I can speak without it, but sometimes you like the visuals. But when we look at the fact that we're averaging, just at Sandy Hook, there have been 44 school shootings. That's the most in US history. That's an important thing to be aware of. But we also look as, in 2004, the leading city in the United States per capita that lost children to suicide was Las Vegas, Nevada, in 2004. Colorado Springs, Colorado was the second leading city in the United States of America. I find that alarming as a native from here. We are seeing a rate of suicide that is alarming. It is our second leading cause of death. The numbers are about to come out for our children. Second leading cause of death. 2 weeks before Christmas, my husband, who's a 10-year homicide detective, responded to a 9-year-old. I think that we all have to be aware of what we can do and what we talk about. And part of what we've learned throughout this is that education and awareness is really critical. Now, one of the things that my dad taught me is always thinking about the situation around you. What are you going to do? Show me how you're going to interrupt an adult if you need to get their attention. Those are the things that we like to teach. How do you interrupt an adult in the playground? Mrs. Posey, it's about somebody's safety. Excuse it. Do you see how you can give them the tools to practice it and talk about it? But a lot of times kids aren't confident enough and they become afraid. So when you look at fight or flight, if you've been trained, you're going to have a better reaction to the action you're given. So part of our job in creating a prevention initiative, which most people don't realize, is a prevention initiative that was created in combination with the Colorado Attorney General's Office and the Center for the Study and Prevention of Violence. The Children's Hospital Behavioral Unit helped us to develop the content in our conversation jump starts. John Michael helped us put the graphics together. That's why I'm sorry I don't have the PowerPoint on so you can see some of it. But there's 8 key issues facing youth today that should be talked about so that kids can say, hey, I think we can all agree. We don't want bad things to happen to children, right? It's not just our job to educate, it's to protect and educate, right? And that's the thing we have as parents that we agree with as well. So when we go through this, one of the things we focus on are 8 key issues that young people face today, and that's data-driven. So these are precursors to violence, and that includes bullying, social media aggression. 70% of our Safe to Tell reports have a relational issue with social media. So that means that a young person is not only sending in a web report, but they are attaching the conversation that's occurring on a live chat, they're attaching photographs or videos, and that is evidence. I'm going to share with you one of our prevented planned school attacks, because I think that we just again had our highest, each month this school year we've had our highest month in the history. So our first year we had 107 reports, all broken down by category. This February, we had 78 suicide interventions of children around the state of Colorado, 24 depressed children, 42, I mean, you get the idea, social media aggression. When we look at it, we also had 2 planned school attacks and 3 weapons taken out of schools. So even though they're littler numbers, they're significant. What I'm going to explain to you is if you are going to engage the young people and the community in being part of the solution of preventing tragedy, we all need to have some time in understanding what to watch for, what to look for, and what's available. We should be providing hope and help to children. And you know, I do it a lot in the recovery process. Platte Canyon, I spent 2 weeks after the tragedy with Emily up there, just going classroom to classroom in small groups, trying to just focus on what are solutions, what to be aware of, if kids are struggling, if kids are engaging in risky behavior. You know, and one of the things I use is a lot of media scenarios. Young people really like that. But if you can reflect back to one of the issues our young people face today, and one of the things that we are aware of with kids dying, is you look at drinking and substance abuse. Even drinking where somebody put a substance in your drink, or smoking marijuana that's laced with tar heroin, with the 22 girls at Cheyenne Mountain High School. When we look at those cases, we see then video of Steubenville, Ohio, where a young girl is being swung by her arms and legs by 2 football players. Does anybody remember that visual graphic? And what you have is you have a bystander filming it. We have another bystander taking photos of it and putting it online. What we want to hope is that if someone sees it online, they're going to respond and say, this is a medical emergency. If someone's passed out from a substance, your body's shutting down. We want to change their mindset on some of these key issues to say, okay, this is a medical emergency. What young people will realize through that is the consequences that started to compile with later a sexual assault and 2 kids being charged and administration being charged, is that they could have reduced the consequences by speaking up. So in those conversation jumpstarts in the classroom, that's one of the most powerful things we've seen. Those are available for schools to use, to engage in health and wellness, and in the schools that are using them, where their SROs are teaching them, St. Vrain introduced it last year, and they more than tripled the number of reports of and they are life-threatening reports that they, at the local level, have intervened in and saved lives. That is no different when I look over at Dan Clemente. I mean, we know each other by name. And you have text-to-tip. You have that option. You have the ability for them to make a web report through Safe to Tell or a phone call. And you also have to focus on making sure that we are raising the awareness and educating our children how to be part of the solution, how to not let somebody in that side door, how to know and recognize what to watch for, what to look for, and what not to ignore. So as we look through some of the things we're doing, we're really focusing on engaging the community members through parent academies and providing those resources at the local level. We host Train the Trainers. We have one April 3rd at the Broadmoor at the Penrose House. We will be doing from receiving the intel to the intervention, to the threat assessment, and then to the threat management. Because part of what schools are focused on right now is the enormous responsibility of keeping children safe. And what I personally know is the amount of time they spend intervening and saving lives. I truly just want you to know that. I just think that I was amazed that so many people weren't aware of how often they are intervening. So one of the things we do is we calculate data statewide, because in the beginning schools didn't want to be singled out, especially Columbine. The media would ask, how many threats have we prevented at Columbine? Well, we would give them the data autonomous. But many times you see headline results. There was just a huge article of 7 adults in a position of trust in various schools that were arrested in a 1-week period for sexual related behavior with a child. The newspaper and none of the media reported where that came from. But what we do know is we know those that were generated because someone spoke up, whether it was through Safe to Tell or whether it was through another means. So the activity is really high by when you see the numbers. And one of the things we look at is, can violence be prevented? Can we prevent when a child is struggling with depression or suicide? And this is the thing that I think we all have to realize, that our policies and procedures from 30 years ago, where the police, we redact the names in the report, the media doesn't cover it. Young people today don't rely on either of those things for their communication. They are texting about it, they are Facebooking about it, they are talking about it, they are grieving because they know. And so one of the things we look at is, how do we change our mindset of handling these issues so that we do not have additional loss? The other part we look at is tracking. We have to track everything because people will tell you that prevention can't be measured, and we've actually shown that it can. We are a model initiative. It is a prevention initiative. The focus is education and awareness. And what we focus on is a partnership from the state level to provide an umbrella so that young people know exactly where to go to report, so that it's not a question no matter what jurisdiction you're in. So part of what I was going to mention is our latest planned school attack includes, not our latest, but one since Sandy Hook that was major and significant, is students online gaming. So they're using the internet and they're online gaming. And during it, one of the kids says, man, I gotta go. I gotta get to bed. I have a math test in the morning. Are you guys gonna be on tomorrow night? One of them responds yes, and one of them says, hey, if I'm not on tomorrow night, it means I'm dead. He says, what do you mean by that? He says, well, you'll hear about a massacre at my school. You should watch the news for it. I'm either gonna kill myself or the police are gonna kill me. It depends how it goes down. It's like, why would you do that? And he starts naming people, he names reasons, he names teachers, and this young man, one of the persons happens to be in Colorado and immediately copies, cuts and pastes, slaps it into a web report. That's why web reporting is my favorite method, because he slaps that, which is evidence, hits send. It's answered at the 24-hour comm center for the State Patrol in Pueblo, because we have 2 911 comm centers for the volume. And immediately I'm notified in Kayak, Colorado Information Analysis Center at Homeland Security, because what we don't know is where. This kid says he goes by this name, I don't even know who he is. But we have the dialogue, and we have the IP address. The person that reported it is protected by law, completely anonymous, because we removed that barrier for kids based on what they told us. And we look at it and we're like, okay, start a search warrant, IP address. They get the search warrant on the IP provider and this is where it's great. Then we do a search warrant on the user. Comes back to a home in Biloxi, Mississippi. Law enforcement hits that house at 2 in the morning. Parents and the kids are like eyes wide open, and when he sees the police come in, he says, I was never gonna do it. And maybe he wasn't, but they took 7 weapons out of his home, and they interrupted a behavior that needed to be interrupted. We cannot ignore a threat, not to anybody's life, not to anyone's safety. It cannot be ignored. 25 years we've had 911. I actually ran 911 way back in the day when we brought it about to enhance. 25 years we've trained people when to use 911. We are seeing a culture and climate that exists amongst adults and children to look the other way. Mind your own business. People that are a little nervous about making the report of this going on down the street because they don't want to bring harm to their own family. So we have hesitant, reluctant witnesses. But if we're going to get information from people that need to give us that piece of the puzzle, we need to make sure they're engaged in a 2-way dialogue where we can get as much information as possible and then we can protect them. So we've used that method for many years. With the FBI Fugitive Squad that I worked on, we used it all the time to find bad guys. I just want you to kind of think through your process of when you see something in your community, how you look out for it, how you watch for it, and use little scenarios with your kids. Especially if your kids are here in middle school, we know that the research shows that's when it peaks. And they need to be prepared now for their future. And understanding some of these things, I would encourage you just to look at our website, check it out. If anyone's interested in the training on April 3rd, we have a cap. We're almost half full, but it is completely funded by a grant. The next thing I would tell you is that one of the proudest moments for me and for many of us in this room that focus on crime prevention and, you know, public safety. My other concern as a citizen and as an officer is the bottom line is we are not investing in the level of public safety like we used to. The number of law enforcement, the amount of time we're given to spend proactively, you know, we can't just continue to be responsive. We have to be engaged and proactive. And so I so admire the agents that really work towards that. Senate Bill 2 is the Senate bill that is engaging Safe to Tell to be, we've had 3 laws passed with Safe to Tell that are model legislation for the country. Safe to Tell is Senate Bill 2. It's an investment, it just passed the Senate unanimously, and it is an investment in the Safe to Tell Prevention Initiative, including the equipment of the Waiter Report, and it will be a funded state program, and this is a precedent-setting event. So, but we still will be partnering and collaborating, and it's all about the people on the local level. Every time they respond and intervene, they are saving a life. So I'm so proud of the partnerships we have and the amazing work, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you.